Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to the Science of Farming show. I am Sister Rashida Muhammad.
I'm Sister Melody Muhammad.
The beautiful Sister Melody Muhammad. We are so happy to be with you all again today by the grace and mercy of Allah. And so we're going to get started in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Today's show is about vermicomposting and about container gardening. Yay. All right, Sister Melody, let's jump right on into this. Now listen, vermicomposting involves worms. And if you all remember on the first show, I was talking about me and those worms. But I know vermicomposting is something that we should all get into. And can you talk to us a little bit about what is vermicomposting?
Okay, well, vermicomposting is when you have these red wiggler worms that we use, because there are different varieties of worms, not the ones you go fishing with, but these ones move in a different direction. They move vertically. So the red wiggler worms are what we use for vermicomposting, and vermicomposting purify your soil. Then you can also use it for a worm tea, which will be later as a fertilizer for your plants.
Yes, ma'am. So last week we talked about composting in the ground or in buckets. So vermicomposting can kind of be done the same way in terms of your containers. So let's talk a little bit about the containers. Talk about the containers and just how, what type of containers you can use.
Are you saying for the vermicomposting?
For the vermicomposting, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so normally what I use from learning from vermicomposting, I came back and used one of those bins that you store clothes in. You know, in particular, I use one of those. So that's a worm bin. Yes, ma'am. So it's based on temperature. So, I left it inside of my downstairs, like in the basement area. And worms do not like the sun or the light. So, when you're growing worms, you want to consider that and have them in a dark spot. And, I could, tell you more about that, as, you ask.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Now, when that dark spot just triggered something in my mind, because I do know that you can have your worm bin. If you have it inside, you can put it, I've seen people do it in the closet. They put them under their sink. And that's if you have those worm bins that you do and you make those little plastic bins yourself. You can put them under and make sure you have air holes, of course, but you can put those under your sink, in your closet, and also in your garage. And it's so interesting that you talk about the temperature, because I know with worm composting, the temperature needs to be at least 59 degrees, and it can get up to like 95 degrees because, like you said, the worms don't like the sun and you don't want it to get too hot in that bin. But also in colder climates, if you have it in the garage or the bin outside, one of the things that they recommend is that you wrap it in like a blanket or something to actually keep the worms and the bin itself warm. So has that been your experience, especially being in a colder climate?
Well, again, I've been taught, by Will Allen, and the practices that we were taught, when I used them, it worked. So I used, again, the bin that people store their clothes in. It had a lid over it. We started off with, compost. So compost is that soil that don't have rocks and lumps and all that stuff in it. And what we did was we end up layering the compost. I end up layering the bin that I had. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to put your red wiggler worms at the bottom. After you put them at the bottom, then you're going to layer it with about 3/4 of your compost, which is your fine soil. So then after that, sis, what we were taught in this particular class is, because worms don't have a big mouth and big teeth, you want to have something real mushy. So what we learned and found out was good, we really did this. We took sweet potatoes, we mashed them up, we cooked them, mashed them up, and then we laid them across the whole top part of our compost bin. Then we wet newspaper, and then we put it on top, and then put the lid. After about, I want to say, a good month and a half, you can lift that lid up and you will see worms that fought through the top to fight to get to that food, because they
Mhm.
eat, they want food, and they fight to the top. And once they get to the top, then you pull that newspaper back and you see nothing but worms. They done fought their way, they purified the soil, and at the end of the day, when you look at that soil, you have black gold, what we say. And that is the best soil that anyone can have, is that black rich black gold, we called it.
Right. And I think we even have a picture of some of those wiggly worms within the black worms. I do know that, especially when it comes to what they eat. Now, I do know that, like you said, we can do the scraps and we can mash them up real good. But I did read and understand that citrus is not good for them because they don't really like an acidic environment. So citrus and onions, you want to keep those type of things out of your bin, correct?
Yeah, so we got to keep in mind, we talking about vermicomposting and composting. So
Right.
even when you composting, you don't want acidic things in it unless you want your pH level to be below
To be
7,
right.
0.0 or 6, because that's for like blueberries and things of that nature. However, when we doing vermicomposting, none of that is in there. We only dealing with the fine compost, the fine soil, the rich soil. And I remember one of the sisters that we worked with early on, that I taught how to do it. She turned it into a business, Sister Nefertari. So she's great, and she's in the Philadelphia area, I believe. And she did a whole vermicomposting business, which is great because, again, that particular soil is black gold, and who don't want black gold?
Yes, ma'am. Now, did Will Allen teach you about a worm to compost bin size ratio? Like how many worms to because I would imagine it depends on how much food you have, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Well, again, depending, like you said, on the size of the bin. If you want to start off small, you can do that. But when I ordered my red wiggler worms from Johnny Seeds, I got 1,000. They come right in the mail.
Okay.
I don't really remember the exact price, but it wasn't expensive. But that's how I started out. And before you know it, sis, when you growing these worms, you end up using them in all of your potting containers moving forward. So in all of your soil, hopefully your goal is to be able to see worms, because
Beautiful.
the worms, they not only fighting and purifying the soil, but they making that air go through your soil, helping it, to have a flow of air.
Right. Yes, ma'am. When so in the summertime, because I'm thinking in Florida, it
Yes.
is so incredibly hot here. So in the summertime, you might want to keep your worm composting, the worm composting bin probably on a porch or a covered area in Florida, because it is extremely, extremely hot. And it's going to get very, very hot in that bin. Anything else you want to talk to us about the vermicomposting?
Just if somebody's doing it, they could Google Will Allen
Mm,
composting,
yeah.
vermicomposting, that is. And I want to say, at times you will add water, but you don't want to, I want to say, drown your worms. So it's a science to everything. So, you want to find that right texture and right medium, so you won't drown them with water, because it's going to get wet at some point. But those are the things you gotta, when you get to that point, if that's what you want to do, then you could reach out to us and we can guide you more on that.
Yes, ma'am. And Sister Melody, also, I know like when we were talking about composting last week, we had mentioned that you can get composting bins if you go to your community training programs. They'll give out free bins. But what about the vermicomposting bins?
Okay, so the vermicomposting bin, again, I use the regular plastic. I want to say 2 inch 2 feet tall bin, and
Mhm.
that's what I use. Again, this stuff is not rocket science. I wouldn't spend a lot of money on, I want to say, going to websites to get certain things because it's really not necessary.
So how
It's
did
not,
you do your bin? So you have your bin, and
yes.
then you had to drill holes in it, correct? Is it
No,
just the bottom?
not for the vermicomposting bin. We talking air is when you doing composting. So
Right.
vermicomposting, you don't need air. So what I did was I got my red wiggler worms in that I ordered. I layered them on the bottom, and then after that, again, I used about 3/4 of that whole bin of my compost, regular compost, but it was fine. It wasn't lumpy. It didn't have
Lumpy. Yes.
rocks in it. It was fine. I sifted it and everything. So then now, once that process was there, then again, I boiled my sweet potatoes and mashed them up, like treated them like they were babies, like they were. And again, they don't have a big mouth. So if you put navy beans in there, for instance, it would just take longer because they can't eat through the navy bean as fast as they would eat through the the smashed up yams that we were taught, and they love them. So
Right.
I was
Right.
able, and again, I taught other people, and other people have done and duplicated it. So I know they learned from that.
And that's exactly what we want to do on this show. We want to connect and encourage people to grow their own, to vermicompost, to compost. We just want to give you a whole idea of what you can do, because you don't have to wait. That's the biggest thing we want everyone to understand. You don't have to wait. You don't have to be an expert. You can jump right in and get started. So we hope that this show is encouraging our family out there to do so. So, Sister Melody, so that takes care of the vermicomposting portion of our show. So, unless you have something else to add, we're going to move right into the second piece of our show, which would be the container gardening, which this is what I like. Go ahead.
Oh no, sis. I think again I touched enough on the vermicomposting. It's a money maker. Black
It
gold is a money
is.
maker.
It
So for
is.
those who may want to just get into vermicomposting, is big business, big dollars. It's important because again, the better your soil, the better plants you have, the better lawn you have, the better everything.
Praise be to Allah. All right, so we're going to jump right into our container gardening. So a lot of people talk about container gardening, but what is container gardening?
Okay, so container garden is basically a confined area instead of growing out in the ground. A lot of people may not have the area, the space, the footage, the capacity to be able to grow just outside in the ground. And we mentioned before that the soil is contaminated. So now
Right.
you can manage your own soil by using containers.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So now, what are some examples? We actually have some pictures that give everyone an example of containers that you can grow your items in, because it can be small, it can be large. You can just show those pictures of the containers that we have on display, and then I'll show you some I have, and then Sister Melody is going to show you some she has in her home.
Yes.
All right. So let's go ahead and show him, Sister Melody, since he's already zoomed in on yours, let's go ahead and show him the cute little face. I love it. Of
Okay, so
containers
I,
that
I
you have.
I did this pot and I made the face. It said I'm a pothead. So you gotta have
Right.
some humor sometime. And this is actually a tree. And you see how this tree is growing?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
it's growing in a container. It's not usually for the indoor. I just brought it indoor for the house for the program to show you. But this is the kind that you can use with your children and come up with all kind of cute designs. And again, I think the children will love, being able to make designs of their own, and they could name it. They could call it spinach head or, whatever you want. But that's an example of what I have right here.
Yes, ma'am. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so now that we got the pictures of some other containers, so go ahead and let's show the pictures of the other containers. And Sister Melody, you could talk us through that, and then I'll show you what the containers that I have here.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So What we have out here, yeah, those are peppers that I planted and it's in a container. All of these plants we have that we're showing right now are in containers. I'm back and forth sometime, crisscrossing the country. So it's, important for me to just be mindful of what I'm doing. So if they're in a container, I can ask my son or somebody to water it for me. The containers, like Sister Rashida said, you can grow all year round. You could bring your herbs in and you could grow them all year round. Of course, you can monitor, the insects a little better when they're in containers. Of course, you have less weeds because you use potting soil for your containers. So yes, if you go to the Home Depot or somewhere, you want to get potting soil for your containers. You don't want to just get the soil from out the ground unless you have compost, and you could do that. This morning I was driving through and I seen that one of my neighbors using their driveway as opposed to using it for their car. So people say all the time different things like, oh, why we are using our lawns to cut grass when we can do other things with it. So this is an example of something you can do with your driveway. I know the men probably wouldn't like that, but hey, when they get hungry, at least they could eat. So that's sage right there. And again, sage is growing in a pot. I would say I recommend, if you growing sage and it's thriving like that, to use a big pot, because sage is a perennial. It's going to come back next year. You don't have to do nothing. You once it, even if you didn't bring it inside, you can have it outside, and next year you got sage again, because it's a perennial, meaning that it comes back every year.
Praise be to Allah. Now I'm going to show you just some of those with the larger pots, but some of the smaller pots can be just like this. Let me get the camera. This is my thyme. Oh, and it smells so good. So you can use thyme in these smaller pots that are here. Make sure you have very good drainage in the bottom. That's very, very important. But I also want to show you all my friend right here, and I'm going to try to lift this pot up because it is very, very heavy. But this is a bigger pot, and guess what I have here, everybody? I'm going to try to show it to you. I'm so excited. I am so excited, and I hope I can get it positioned just right. But look, I have some tangerines coming in. You all see that?
Yes.
I am so excited. I have about 3 or 4 on here. It's kind of difficult to maneuver with this pot, so I'm going to put it down here. But we have tangerines, so I really wanted to show you that you can really grow. Container gardening is so much fun. And Sister Melody, can you talk about some of the benefits of growing in containers?
Yes, ma'am. So as I said, it's a way to start off, because everybody, gonna sometime have an experience that might be great. They might see their plants thriving, they might not. So what I'd say with the containers is the easy way that you could pour the water into the pot, and then you could feel the bottom or look up at the bottom and see first if you have drainage. Make sure that you got that pot in some sun for at least 6 hours a day, hopefully. And, again, you want to use potting soil if you don't have compost that you want to use. And, again, you can keep an eye on the pests, because, of course, we know that we got these different pests and the insects that's going to get on your plants, usually when you're doing a bigger area of planting. So, to start off, again, I would always recommend, to start off simple with the containers, because you can grow. Now, the only disadvantage, not the only, but one of them is that the roots can sometimes girdle. So
Yes.
when girdling is, they're going to spin around sometime and they won't have room to grow. So consider what you're growing. Like Sister Rashida, we discussed peppermint. Peppermint is a plant that if you grow that peppermint and it's not contained, it will spread. It will spread all over your land. And if you want your whole area to smell like mint, then fine. But it's hard to manage once that mint or spearmint, all the mints will spread. So again, you want to usually contain them, but I would contain them in a big pot. And I, maybe have pictures there to show you where my peppermints are thriving, and you could use it to make teas, Sister Rashida. You could use it to make even lemonades and put the little thing. You could use mint for headaches and everything else. So I could go on and on, but yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. And that was the next thing that we were actually going to talk about, teas, because I consider it like a tea garden. So you can plant a tea garden. Listen, everybody, you can start somewhere. You can plant you some teas. Of course, the ideal is to plant you some food to survive on, but you can plant some teas. And like Sister Melody said, you're talking about peppermint, you're talking about even sage, and you're talking about spearmint. But just as our dear sister mentioned, you want to have those pretty much in a pot or a large pot because they will take over your yard, because they do spread. So, and some of them consider them an invasive type plant, but that just means they take over wherever they are. All right. So the other thing that we're going to talk about, Sister Melody, are perennials. So the sizing of the pot, what should I consider?
Okay, so again, whatever is thriving and it's growing, large, and it look like it's nice and full, like the peppermint, the rosemary, that's a perennial. The sage is a perennial. Tomatoes are not. Every now and then you might get one that came back, like they call it a neighbor or something like that. But either way, a volunteer plant. So
Right.
they just came back. So certain plants, again, you want to herbs that basil won't come back every year. So maybe keep that in a smaller pot. So you got your herbs, you got basil, you got thyme, like you have. I have rosemary. Rosemary not easy to grow, but mine is thriving now in that container. And rosemary come back every year.
Sister
And
Melody,
rosemary on what?
I want to jump in when you
Salmon?
said I want to jump in with right there with that
Yes.
rosemary. When you said it's not easy, look, I have rosemary, and it is. Come on, baby, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Yes, ma'am. So yes, you do have to pay special attention to your rosemary.
Yes. So this is the first time, to be honest, that I can feel my rosemary thriving, and I'm just being patient. And
Right.
that's one thing about gardening and doing things. We learn patience,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
experimenting means that you're going to have your hypothesis that's going to be a theory, or it might be something else, because depending on where you at, the temperature, who's doing it, the time, how much you water it, it's so much the science that we can never say anything is right and exact. So the
Absolutely.
beauty is we learning, and we could learn from each other and one another.
Right. And what about our annuals? Talk a little bit about the annuals.
Okay, so the annuals are good when it comes, because we talking about food. We're not talking about too many flowers. However, we want to talk about like marigolds and stuff like that
Right.
will help
Right.
with some of the things that we plant, and in terms of keeping certain pests and bugs and insects out. However, and we want the aesthetics, but we want to focus mainly on the annuals that's we're going to use. Like, if we cooking and we striving to cook, if we don't want to use too much salt and these other seasonings that we know are really hurting our
Mhm.
body, we want to use as many herbs as we can. So you got the basil, you have the thyme. I don't think that come back every year. And of course, I have it's so many different types of basils. So you have the purple,
Yes.
yes, and
Yes.
you have all of these different kinds. I wish I had my plants in front of me. I could just actually see them as I'm talking. But all of the things that give your food seasoning. One thing I can say is a good seasoning, saffron, but it's the
Yes.
most expensive, but it's hard to grow here. But it's so good. It make your food taste so good. So
Yes,
if somebody
ma'am.
can master that, Sister Rashida, we'll be what in the house? I'm making
Yes,
money.
ma'am. And that's the beautiful thing about this also. And that's why we want to connect with those who are out there in the audience, because we want to know, what are you doing? And I had a beautiful sister, a sister Wanda. She's relocated from Tampa, and she's in Atlanta now. And she sent me the most adorable pictures of her onions with the onion bulb, and they're so small and cute. And she said new beginnings. I was so excited for her because she does tap into the show. So it's so rewarding to know that people are actually getting started, doing what we're encouraging them to do, which means we're doing what the minister asked us to do: grow your own food. And that's what we're encouraging people to do. That's our motivation. That's our love. Let's do what our minister asked us to do, and let's grow our own food so that we can be healthy. And do you have anything else to add, Sister Melody?
I just wanted to say garlic is something that we use regularly, but it's not something that you want to really grow in a pot. At least I didn't
Right.
have the good experience. My
Absolutely.
garlic bulbs is like this small.
Yes.
I have them, but they not like I want them to be. So
Yes.
garlic, my experience is growing them, in a raised bed or either on the ground.
Right. And I was just so excited that she even started growing something, and that, she thought enough of me to share the picture with me. So shout out to you, Sister Wanda. Very, very happy to see that picture. And anyone
Yeah.
else, if you all have pictures that you want to send us, if you want to reach out to us, you can do so at scienceoffarming@gmail.com, and reach out to us, because we love to invite you onto the show. We'd love to feature you and what you're doing in your gardening. And also, we ask that you please support this network, this broadcast, the Closing the Gap broadcast. Please support it, and continue to log in not only to this podcast, but to all the podcasts that are featured on this show. What a beautiful opportunity. So, Sister Melody, anything you want to add before we get ready to close out?
If it possible, I could show. We got another picture of the pots that we could paint with the children. Because again, I always
Yes.
want to encourage people to get the children involved, and I think that art and painting is science. So if we could just not that one, but it was a different one that we had maybe. But okay, that's an example. But my aunt had did it, and that's it.
There it is.
So she's so creative. Her see down here where the arms is, she got the feet like that too. I did the face and she did the painting, and up top we got on near flowers. We got purple flowers. So again, there's so many things that we can do when it comes to gardening and container garden, and hopefully get our children involved, because they are our future.
Yes, ma'am. That is so beautiful. I can't wait to do one of my pots like that. I really like that idea. Yes, ma'am. That is too cute. So
Yes.
we're going to go ahead and prepare to close out our show. We want to thank everyone for joining us. We look forward to you joining our next show. It's going to be next Tuesday at 6 p.m. And share the flyer. We're going to send out a flyer. Share the flyer. Please get involved. And again, reach out to us and let us know what you're doing. We also have a Facebook page. It's the Science of Farming Facebook page. Go on there. If you have any questions for us, let us know. But reach out, connect. That's what we're here for. We thank you so much for joining us again for another The Science of Farming show. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, I did hear, I'm sorry, I did hear that we do have a question. Yes. Are the are the tower gardens good for indoor gardening? If so, what foods are best to grow in a indoor tower gardens? Indoor tower gardens, got it.
Well, I would do the lettuce myself, because lettuce, right
Absolutely.
now, that's just one example. And herbs, I would say, not
Yes,
some of the
ma'am.
heavier plants like, tomatoes and cucumbers. They kind of heavy. They too heavy for like indoor hydroponics.
Right. Thank you so much, sister, for that. And we have Brother West that says, Assalamu alaikum, family. Any recommendations for plants to start for a beginner container gardener?
Yeah, brother, go ahead and start some sunflower seeds. They don't take long time to germinate, but it take a long time to grow. It don't take long to germinate, but it take a long time to grow. But then again, I wouldn't do it in a container. So let's go with some herbs, brother. Like I'm trying to think of a herb, sage. Start
Right.
with maybe sage, right, sis?
Right, absolutely. And the thyme that I was showing, you can start with the thyme, any of the herbs, like she said. You can start with that for a beginner. But I'm so glad to see the brothers. That's what I'm talking about. Jump on in. Jump on in. Thank you, Brother West, for your question. Do we have any more questions? All right. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and close out our show. Again, we thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all again right here Tuesday, 6 p.m. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, ma'am.